Hello everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I never planned on serving it at all. Sometimes the universe just hands you the perfect opportunity to watch someone realize they made a terrible mistake. My name is Tony, and this is what happened when my ex-girlfriend decided I wasn't good enough for her new life after her graduation. Sylvia and I had been friends since we were kids growing up in the same neighborhood. Our families lived 3 houses apart on the same street, and we'd known each other since elementary school. She was the smart girl who always had her homework done perfectly, and I was the kid who was better with his hands than with books. We'd walk to school together on some mornings and hang out during summer breaks. Even as kids, Sylvia talked about becoming a doctor someday. I was more interested in how things were built and how they worked, spending my free time helping my Uncle Danny with carpentry projects and learning basic construction skills. We started dating when we were 15, right after finishing our sophomore year of high school. It felt completely natural because we'd been best friends for so long, and everyone in our families always said we'd end up together anyway. Sylvia was ambitious and driven, while I was more practical and focused on learning skills that could get me a good job right after graduation. The transition from friendship to dating was easy and comfortable. We'd been spending most of our time together anyway, and now we just held hands and kissed goodnight. When it came time to think about college during our senior year, the differences in our family situations became obvious. Sylvia's parents had been saving for her education since she was born and had connections at medical schools. My family simply couldn't afford to send me to college, even with financial aid and student loans. My dad worked in a factory making car parts, my mom cleaned houses for extra income, and there were 3 kids in our family to support. Even with grants and scholarships, the cost of tuition, books, room and board, and living expenses was completely beyond what we could manage. I wasn't bitter about it. That was just our financial reality. Due to these financial challenges, I couldn't continue in college like Sylvia was planning to do. Instead, I made the practical choice to go straight into the workforce and start earning money immediately after graduating high school. I opted to take a low-entry construction job with a local company that was willing to train new workers. I started as a general laborer making $12 an hour, which wasn't much money, but I was disciplined with my finances and saved every penny I could manage. I lived at home with my parents, drove an old pickup truck, and didn't spend money on anything I didn't absolutely need. While my friends were going off to college and partying, I was getting up at 5 a.m. to be on construction sites by 6 a.m. I learned how to operate equipment, read blueprints, and handle the physical demands of building work. The pay was low initially, but I could see a path to earning more money as I gained experience and skills. Meanwhile, Sylvia was incredibly ambitious about her medical school plans, and her parents supported her dreams completely. Her parents understood the medical field and could provide guidance about her education path. But even with her parents' better incomes, they couldn't afford to fully support Sylvia through medical school without taking on significant debt themselves. Medical school is extremely expensive. Tuition alone can be $60,000 per year, and that doesn't include living expenses, books, medical equipment, and other costs that pile up over 4 years. Sylvia managed to get admission to a decent medical school after taking the MCAT and going through the application process. But when the financial aid package came through, it wasn't enough to cover all her expenses. She was looking at having to turn down her acceptance because the gap between what she could afford and what medical school actually cost was too large to bridge. When I realized Sylvia was going to lose her admission to medical school because of money, I made a decision that seemed obvious at the time, but would completely change both our lives. I was still head over heels in love with her and couldn't bear the thought of watching her dreams die because of something as fixable as money. I had been saving every dollar I could since starting work, with the goal of eventually starting my own construction business. I'd been putting aside money for tools, a work truck, business licenses, and all the startup costs that come with going independent. It wasn't a huge amount by medical school standards, but it represented everything I had worked for since graduating high school. I decided to sacrifice my business dreams and put aside my own goals to use all my savings to cover Sylvia's bills and help her get through medical school. I believed it was an investment in our future together as a couple. Once she became a doctor and started earning a physician's salary, we'd both benefit from her success, and maybe then I'd have the resources to start my own business. What started as helping with her living expenses and textbooks quickly turned into something much bigger and more expensive. Medical school tuition was incredibly high, and the cost of living in the city where her school was located was much more than what Sylvia could handle alone, even with my help. While Sylvia was in medical school, the financial demands became overwhelming. I wasn't just paying her rent and buying groceries. I also ended up co-signing some of her private student loans because her credit score wasn't good enough to qualify on her own, and her parents had already borrowed as much as they could. Co-signing those loans was a massive financial commitment for someone making construction wages. I was legally responsible for tens of thousands of dollars in debt if Sylvia couldn't pay them back after graduation. But I believed completely in our love and our future together. This level of financial support was a lot for me to handle on a construction worker's salary, but I believed in love above everything else. Sylvia had told me countless times that we would be together forever, that she'd never forget what I was doing for her education, and that we were building something that would last our entire lives together. For 4 years, I worked overtime every week I could get it, took side jobs on weekends, and lived as cheaply as possible, so every extra dollar could go towards supporting Sylvia's medical education. I drove the same old truck, wore the same work clothes until they fell apart, and never bought anything for myself that wasn't absolutely necessary. After many years of working hard to assist Sylvia financially and emotionally, she finally graduated from medical school. I was incredibly proud of her achievement and felt like all our sacrifices had been worth it. She was officially a graduate, and we could finally start building the life together that we'd been working toward for so long. Sylvia's graduation party was held at her parents' house the weekend after the ceremony. Her extended family came in from out of town, her medical school friends were there, and everyone was celebrating her incredible achievement. I felt proud to be there as her boyfriend, knowing that I'd played a major role in making her success possible. But at the graduation party, Sylvia humiliated me by dumping me in front of everyone in the most cruel way imaginable. I had gone to the restroom to relieve myself, and as I was walking back toward the main party area, I could hear Sylvia talking to her family about her future plans. She was telling her parents and her sister that she was planning to leave me now that she was almost a doctor. She thought I was out as she spoke, but I came back quickly after using the restroom and could hear her say clearly, "I'm a doctor now. I need a husband who matches my new life. No offense, but a construction worker isn't it?" Sylvia was explaining to her family that she'd outgrown our relationship and needed to find someone more appropriate for her new professional status. She talked about wanting to date other doctors or professionals who could understand her career and move in the same social circles she'd be joining. It was after making this statement that Sylvia turned around and saw me standing there, and she immediately realized I had heard everything she just said about dumping me. The conversation stopped completely, and everyone looked uncomfortable knowing that I'd overheard her plans to leave me. Maybe Sylvia expected me to cause a scene or get angry and start arguing with her in front of her family. But I had learned from years of construction work how to stay calm under pressure and not let emotions control my actions. I kept completely composed, forced a smile onto my face, raised my glass, and said clearly, "To Sylvia, may success bring you everything you deserve." Then I finished my drink, congratulated her parents on their daughter's achievement, and left the party without saying another word to anyone. I drove home in complete silence, processing what had just happened and what it meant for my future. In the days that followed the graduation party, Sylvia didn't call or text me at all. It was like our relationship had ended completely at that moment when she announced to her family that she was leaving me. She made no effort to apologize, explain herself, or even acknowledge what had happened between us. I wasn't surprised by her silence, but it still hurt to have someone I'd loved and supported for so many years just disappear from my life without any real conversation about what we'd meant to each other. It felt like she'd used me to get through medical school and was now discarding me like I'd never mattered at all. About a week after the graduation party, I received a phone call that changed everything. The loan servicer and financial verification officers tied to Sylvia's medical licensing process reached out to me directly because they needed information and documentation related to the private loans I had co-signed. They explained that as part of the medical licensing process, they needed co-signer confirmation for several things: proof of my income and financial stability, contact verification to make sure I was still reachable, and formal acknowledgement that I was still legally responsible for the loans Sylvia had taken out. This was all standard procedure for new doctors who had co-signers on their educational loans. The medical board and licensing agencies wanted to make sure that all financial obligations were properly documented and that there were no irregularities that could affect a new doctor's ability to practice. I didn't immediately respond to their requests for information and documentation. After what Sylvia had said at her graduation party, I wasn't feeling obligated to jump into action just because she needed my cooperation to move forward with her career. I took some time to think about the situation and what my options were. Legally, I was still responsible for the loans regardless of our relationship status. But that didn't mean I had to make things easy for someone who had just publicly humiliated me and thrown away years of love and support. It quickly became apparent that Sylvia had suddenly realized her mistake in the way she'd handled our breakup. She couldn't get rid of me as cleanly as she'd thought because my cooperation was required for her licensing process. Without my prompt response to the verification requests, her loan refinancing was stalling, which meant her financial clearance for her medical license was being held up. This was going to create a serious problem for Sylvia's career launch. She might have successfully graduated from medical school and earned her degree, but she couldn't actually practice medicine or start her residency program without completing the licensing process and financial clearance requirements. At first, Sylvia sent me a casual text message. "Hey, I think you got a call from a board about my paperwork. Can you please call them back when you get a chance?" She was trying to sound normal and friendly, like nothing had happened between us at the graduation party. When I didn't respond to that first text, she sent another one the next day. "This is actually pretty urgent. I need you to confirm the loan information with the verification office. It's holding up my licensing process." Her tone was becoming more direct and anxious. Then the phone calls started one after another, as the deadlines for her paperwork were approaching. Sylvia's tone shifted dramatically from polite and casual to desperate and panicked because her entire career launch depended on my signature and cooperation with the verification process. I could tell from her increasingly frantic voicemails that she was starting to understand the position she'd put herself in. She'd assumed she could just walk away from our relationship without any consequences, but now she realized she still needed me for something important. I didn't scream or insult her. I simply decided to wait and see how desperate she would become. I had all the power in this situation, and I wanted her to fully understand that. Every hour that I didn't respond to her calls and texts was another hour of panic for Sylvia. She was probably imagining her medical license being delayed, her residency position being given to someone else, and her having to spend months restarting the process months after. When I finally did pick up the phone after letting her call for several days, my words were calm and measured. "You said you didn't need me anymore because I'm just a construction worker. Now you're calling me nonstop, begging for help. What exactly changed in the last week?" Sylvia immediately started rambling about how she needed me to please confirm the loan information with the servicer so her licensing could move forward. She tried to act like the conversation at her graduation party had been some kind of misunderstanding or joke that I'd taken too seriously. She explained that the medical board was requiring all co-signers to verify their information, and without my cooperation, her licensing was on hold. Sylvia begged me to call the verification office back and provide whatever documentation they needed to clear her financial background check. I listened to everything she had to say, and then I told her calmly that I would be happy to confirm the loan information with the servicer, but only when we reached an agreement about her repaying me for all the money I had spent supporting her through medical school over the past years. I explained that since she no longer wanted me in her life and felt that I wasn't good enough for her new status as a doctor, it seemed fair that she should pay me back for the financial investment I had made in her education when I thought we had a future together. Sylvia was desperate enough to agree to almost anything at that point. She knew that if she refused my terms, she would have to find a new co-signer and reapply for loan verification, which would cost her months of delays and waste all the money she'd already paid for the current application process. So she agreed to my demand for repayment, probably thinking it was a small price to pay to get her medical license and start earning a doctor's salary. Sylvia said she would pay me back everything I had contributed to her education once she got her licensing sorted out and started working. I told Sylvia that I would need our agreement in writing with proper legal documentation before I would contact the loan servicer. I got a lawyer, and we worked together to do some estimates of exactly how much money I had contributed to Sylvia's education over 4 years. The total amount was substantial. When we added everything up with a reasonable interest rate, Sylvia owed me a lot for her medical education. Sylvia agreed to pay this amount according to a specific schedule that my lawyer and I worked out. She was desperate to get her licensing process moving and probably assumed that once she started earning a doctor's salary, the debt would be manageable over time. One thing Sylvia didn't understand about our written agreement was that it didn't actually require me to follow through with confirming the loan information to the servicer. She needed my cooperation, but the repayment agreement was separate from any obligation I had to help her with her licensing process. The contract simply stated that Sylvia owed me money for her educational expenses and would repay it according to the agreed schedule. There was nothing in the document that said I had to contact the loan servicer or cooperate with her verification process in exchange for the repayment agreement. After getting Sylvia to sign the legal agreement acknowledging that she owed me money and would pay me back on a specific timeline, I ghosted her again. I stopped answering her calls and texts, and I let the deadlines for her loan verification pass without providing the cooperation she needed. It was past the deadline for her paperwork when Sylvia realized she'd been outmaneuvered. She started sending me insulting messages, calling me the devil, and using other derogatory words to express her anger about the situation I'd put her in. But I didn't care about her insults. I had what I wanted in writing. Sylvia probably managed to sort out verification months later. I didn't know or care how she resolved her licensing problems because I had moved on to the next phase of my plan. When the agreed-upon time came for Sylvia to start making payments on our debt agreement, I had my lawyer drag her to court for enforcement. She had signed a legal contract promising to pay me back, and I was going to make sure she honored that commitment. At first, Sylvia refused to pay anything, arguing in court that I hadn't completed my part of the bargain by helping with her loan verification. But the agreement had been airtight, prepared by my lawyer, and there was nothing in the contract that required me to help her with the licensing process. The payment schedule was divided into monthly installments over time, and Sylvia had to comply with the court's order to pay. If she defaulted on the agreement, the court could step in with serious consequences, either locking her up for contempt or giving me legal access to her assets and future earnings. She really had no other option than to comply with the payment plan or face losing everything she'd worked for. The court had the power to garnish her wages, freeze her bank accounts, or put liens on any property she owned if she tried to avoid paying what she owed me. Looking back on this whole situation, I learned some valuable lessons about relationships, money, and self-respect. The biggest lesson was that you should never sacrifice your own dreams and financial security for someone who sees you as temporary or disposable. I also learned that actions have consequences, and people who think they can use others without any accountability are often wrong. Sylvia thought she could take my money, my support, and my love for years, then discard me when she no longer needed me. She found out that relationships aren't just things you can walk away from without any ongoing obligations. Most importantly, I learned to focus on myself and my own goals first. I'm back to working toward starting my own construction business, but this time I have a substantial amount of money coming in from Sylvia's monthly payments. The money she's paying me back is helping fund the dreams I had to put aside to support her education. I'm not bitter about what happened because, ultimately, it taught me who Sylvia really was and saved me from wasting more years with someone who didn't value what I brought to the relationship. Some people will always think they're better than others based on job titles or income levels. But character matters more than credentials. The construction work that she thought made me unworthy of her new life as a doctor has actually given me skills, discipline, and opportunities that many college graduates don't have. I'm building something real and valuable with my hands and my mind, and I don't need anyone's approval or validation to feel good about my choices. Sometimes, the best revenge is just living well and letting people face the consequences of their own decisions. Sylvia wanted to use me and then throw me away, but she discovered that actions have lasting consequences that can't be avoided just because you have a medical degree. The phone calls from the medical board that started this whole chain of events taught both of us that you can't just erase people from your life when they become inconvenient. Some connections and obligations continue long after the relationship ends, especially when money and legal agreements are involved. I'm grateful for everything that happened, because it showed me what I'm capable of when I stop putting other people's dreams ahead of my own. Sylvia may be a doctor now, but I'm the one who's truly free to build the life I want without worrying about someone using me and then discarding me when something better comes along. Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Nick, and for a long time, I thought I had a solid marriage. Not perfect, but solid. My wife, Audrey, and I had been together for years. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always found a way to work through things. At least that's what I believed. But looking back now, I realized that while I was holding on to the idea of our marriage, Audrey had already checked out. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was little things. She stopped doing the little things she used to do. People go through stress, mood shift, and life gets overwhelming. I get that. But this wasn't just stress. This was different. People don't wake up one morning and start treating their spouse like a burden. Changes like that don't just happen without a reason. And I was determined to find out what that reason was. She started coming home late, and every time I asked where she had been, her answers were vague. Uninterested. Just out, she'd say, barely looking up from her phone. When I pushed a little, just a simple out where, she'd roll her eyes or sigh like I was bothering her. That was new. Audrey never used to be this dismissive. The woman I married used to tell me everything, sometimes in excruciating detail. Now, I was lucky if I got more than a one-word answer. Then came the phone. It was always with her. If she was in the living room, it was in her hand. If she got up to grab a glass of water, the phone went with her. Late at night, I'd see the glow of the screen. I'd ask, "Who are you texting?" and she'd say, "Just a friend." When I asked which friend, she'd snap, "Why do you care?" One night, as we lay in bed, I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I turned to her and asked, "Audrey, what's wrong? Why have you been acting this way?" She didn't even hesitate. She just exhaled sharply and said, "If I had something to say, I'd say it. Let me sleep, please." That hurt. The confirmation of my fears came a few days later. A call from a friend. He was direct when we began speaking. "Hey, I don't want to be that guy, but I think you should look into Audrey. I saw her with a man, and they don't look like just friends." I was speechless. My first reaction was denial. No, not Audrey. Not my wife. There had to be some explanation. But then I thought about the way she'd been acting. The distance. The secrecy. The late nights. The locked phone. The attitude shift. And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't coming out of nowhere. I wanted to believe my friend was wrong. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I already knew he wasn't. I knew something was off with Audrey, but knowing it and proving it were two different things. I needed hard evidence, something undeniable, something she couldn't talk her way out of. And for that, I had to start with her phone. Now, Audrey had always been protective of her phone, but lately, it had gone from normal caution to full-blown paranoia. She kept it on her at all times, whether she was in the kitchen, the bathroom, or even just stepping outside for a minute. She never left it unattended, and when she was using it, she angled the screen away from me. That alone was suspicious, but I needed more than just a gut feeling. One night, I finally got a small window of opportunity. She had left her phone on the couch while stepping into the bathroom. My heart pounded as I reached for it. This was my chance. I swiped up to unlock it, but then, dead end. The password had been changed. I tried the old one just in case, but it was no good. My stomach tightened. Audrey and I had never hidden our passwords from each other before. This wasn't just a coincidence. That was the moment I knew she was hiding something. And whatever it was, she didn't want me to see it. I put the phone back exactly where it was and sat there. If Audrey was cheating, she couldn't erase every footprint. People slip up when they get comfortable. They get sloppy, and that's when they get caught. If I couldn't get to her phone, I had to take a different approach. I needed to see it with my own eyes. A few days later, I finally got my chance. Audrey told me she was going out to grab something real quick. No extra details, no mention of who she was going with, just vague enough to make my instincts flare up. So, I decided to follow her. I waited a few minutes after she left, then grabbed my car keys and drove out, making sure to stay far enough behind that she wouldn't notice. I tailed her through a few streets until she pulled up in front of an unfamiliar house. She got out of the car and walked straight to the door, knocking with the confidence of someone who had done this before. The door opened, and there he was, some guy I had never seen before. As if I knew, I had my phone in hand to take photos of everything. The guy didn't look surprised to see her. In fact, he smiled, stepping aside so she could walk in. The door shut behind them, and just like that, my wife was inside another man's home. I watched a few pictures I took on my phone because I knew I'd need them later. I didn't go in. I didn't call her. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there for a few more minutes, staring at the house, at the reality of my marriage falling apart right in front of me. Then, without a word, I started my car and drove home. She came back later that night, acting completely normal. That was the part that got to me the most. I decided I had waited long enough. I wasn't going to let this drag on any longer. I called her into the living room and told her to sit down. She sighed, clearly annoyed, but she sat anyway, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me like she had better things to do. I took a deep breath, looked her dead in the eyes, and said, "I want you to end whatever's going on, or we're done." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just stated it as a fact. She frowned, shaking her head. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice flat. "There's nothing going on." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and turned the screen toward her. There they were, clear pictures of her walking into his house, laughing with him. I watched her face as she looked at them. For a second, just a split second, she looked caught. Then, just as quickly, her expression changed. The guilt disappeared, replaced by something else. Anger. "You even followed me? That's crazy," she snapped, her voice rising. "You don't trust me, so now you're stalking me? That's sick, Nick." I felt something inside me go cold. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't even surprised. Instead of taking responsibility, she was flipping it back on me, trying to make me the bad guy for finding out. I exhaled slowly, nodding to myself. "Okay," I said, standing up. "Got it." I didn't argue. There was no point. She had already made her choice. The next week was a blur of silence. We still lived under the same roof, but it felt like we were strangers. No small talk. No fake smiles. Just two people existing in the same space, waiting for something to happen. She didn't try to explain herself. She didn't try to fix anything. And I already knew she wasn't going to stop seeing him. I wasn't going to beg her to stay loyal. That wasn't love. That was desperation, and I wasn't desperate. So, while she carried on pretending nothing had changed, I made a quiet trip to my lawyer's office and started the process. If she wanted to be with him so badly, she could have him. But she wasn't going to take me down with her. One morning, as I got ready for work, Audrey unexpectedly came to meet me. I was halfway through buttoning my shirt when Audrey spoke. Her voice was calm. "I'm making you dinner tonight." I froze for just a second, my fingers pausing over the last button. It took a moment for her words to fully register. Audrey hadn't cooked for me in months. Not since all this started. Lately, she barely even acknowledged my presence unless it was to be cold or dismissive. And now, out of nowhere, she wanted to make dinner? I turned to look at her. She was standing near the dresser, scrolling through her phone. And that's what made it suspicious. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to see if she'd followed up, maybe offer some kind of explanation, but she didn't. "All right," I finally said, keeping my tone neutral. If this was a game, I wasn't about to show my hand first. As I left for work, my mind wouldn't let it go. Was this an attempt to smooth things over? Maybe she felt guilty and wanted to make some kind of peace offering. Or was she setting the stage for something else? A confession? An excuse? A final act of control before pulling the rug out from under me? I wasn't about to sit around and wait to find out. What Audrey didn't know was that I'd already taken steps to free myself from this marriage. The divorce papers were prepared, sitting neatly in a folder, waiting for the right moment. And more than that, I had something she wouldn't see coming. While she had been sneaking around with her secret lover, I had been getting close to someone too, her best friend. It started as casual conversations, little moments of shared frustration about Audrey's behavior. But over time, it became something more. She knew the woman Audrey had become, and she had no illusions about who she really was. So I decided if tonight's dinner was some kind of mind game, if she still had her affair going on, I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't get angry. I would simply end this marriage on my terms. I came home that evening with a feeling I couldn't quite describe. Audrey was in the kitchen, and the smell of home-cooked food filled the air, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. If this were a few months ago, I might have been excited, maybe even hopeful that she was trying to fix things. But I knew better now. Whatever this dinner was, it wasn't a peace offering. I sat down at the table, watching her as she moved gracefully, setting the plates, pouring the wine, and smiling. We ate mostly in silence. She didn't ask about my day, and I didn't ask about hers. The only sound was the clinking of silverware against porcelain, the occasional sip of wine, and the tension sitting between us like a third guest at the table. Halfway through the meal, I put my fork down and looked at her. She was too calm, too composed. A woman who had already made up her mind. I leaned back slightly and asked, "So, have you ended your affair?" She didn't even flinch. She just smirked and leaned back in her chair like she had been waiting for this moment. Then she said it. "I'm leaving you." I exhaled slowly, more out of amusement than anything else. There was a time when those words would have broken me, when I would have begged her to stay, to reconsider. But now they felt like an overdue ending to a story I should have closed a long time ago. I smiled, a genuine smile. Then I got up from my seat, walked into the bedroom, and came back with a stack of neatly arranged papers. I placed them on the table in front of her and slid them across. "Perfect," I said, my voice steady, controlled. "I already prepared the paperwork. Sign them." For the first time that evening, her confidence wavered. She hadn't expected this. She stared at the papers, then at me, searching for some kind of reaction she could use against me. But there was nothing. Just calm. And then ding-dong. Her head snapped toward the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. I, on the other hand, had been waiting for this moment all night. I pushed my chair back, took my time walking to the door, and pulled it open. And there she was. Standing in the doorway, looking effortlessly beautiful, was Audrey's best friend. The woman Audrey had trusted with all her secrets. The woman I had been getting closer to ever since I realized my marriage was already dead. I stepped aside and gestured toward her. "Meet my new girlfriend." The look on Audrey's face was priceless. It was beyond shock. It was betrayal, disbelief, maybe even regret. She had forgotten that when you play games, you better be prepared to lose. I won't lie to you, Audrey did not take it well. When she realized I had beaten her to it, she snapped. It was like watching someone go from calm to completely unhinged in a matter of seconds. She went from stunned silence to yelling, asking me if I had lost my mind, calling me every name she could think of. But I didn't argue. I didn't need to. My job was done. The papers were on the table, and she had a decision to make: sign them, or let the court handle the rest. At first, she acted like she wouldn't play dirty. She pretended she was okay with it, that she just wanted to move on. But I knew her too well. The moment reality hit her, she became the woman I knew she could be when things didn't go her way: spiteful, vengeful. ready to destroy everything in her path. It wasn't about the marriage anymore. It was about making me suffer. And she did everything in her power to try. She went to court and played the victim. She told them I had been controlling, manipulative, and even abusive. She claimed she had felt trapped in the marriage, that I had isolated her from friends, made her feel worthless, and emotionally tormented her. She even threw in a few fake stories, things that never happened, just to make me look like the villain. And the worst part? Some people believed her. That's the thing about lies. If someone says them with enough confidence, they start to sound like the truth. But I wasn't about to let her rewrite history. When my turn came, I let the evidence speak for itself. I had photos of her sneaking into her lover's house. I had text messages that made it painfully clear that this wasn't just some innocent friendship. And then there was the financial part. Bank statements that proved she had been using money from our joint account to fund her affair. My lawyer made sure to highlight every single detail, every withdrawal, every expense that linked back to her affair. But the real hit came when we talked about the emotional toll. I had spent months in that marriage feeling like I was going crazy, second-guessing myself, wondering if I was the problem. My lawyer argued that the mental strain she had put me through, the lies, the gaslighting, the betrayal, had taken a serious toll on my well-being. And the court listened. When the final ruling came, I could see the defeat in Audrey's eyes. The judge split the assets fairly, but thanks to my solid proof, I kept most of what I had worked for. She didn't get to walk away with everything as she had planned. She thought she could ruin me, but in the end, she only exposed herself. And as I walked out of that courtroom, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. You'd think that after everything, I'd feel complete, satisfied even. But the truth is, no one walks away from something like this without scars. I moved on, at least that's what I told myself. Audrey's best friend and I started seeing each other. She had been there through the fallout. She had seen how Audrey treated me. And unlike my ex-wife, she actually seemed to appreciate me. But deep down, a part of me just couldn't shake the feeling that no matter who I was with, I'd always be waiting for the other shoe to drop. You don't go through betrayal like this and come out the same. I learned that trust isn't just given, it's earned. And once it's broken, it never quite fits back together the way it used to. Could I ever trust someone enough to get married again? Right now, I don't think so. Not because I don't want to, but because I don't know if I'll ever look at love the same way. It's like when you touch a hot stove as a kid. Once you get burned, you flinch every time your hand gets near the heat. And me? I got burned badly. At the end of the day, I realized something important. Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who betray us the hardest. And when they do, the best revenge isn't anger. It's not trying to get even. It's not wasting energy hating them. No, the best revenge is moving on, living well, becoming someone they can never have again, and making sure they regret losing you every single day. And believe me, Audrey regretted it. That's enough for me. So, that's my story, guys. A wild one, I know. But that's life, right? You think you know someone, you build a life with them, and one day, they throw it all away like it never mattered. But here's the thing, I didn't let it destroy me. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, don't let it destroy you either. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think I handled this the right way? Should I have done something differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And remember, if something feels off in your relationship, it probably is. Don't ignore the signs. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.